Happy Mother's Day. You are tuned into Voices of East New York, and I am your host, Nikki Lucas. Today, we're going to welcome once again CEO of Beacon Elder Care, Yvonne Murphy, which had a lot of great information last Sunday, and we wanted to continue the discussion this week. We will also welcome Kimberly Council, candidate for City Council in the 37th Council District. We'll talk a little bit about her contentious race today. Before we get started and welcome our first guest on, I just want to reflect on a couple of things that's been going on this week, which is policing, social distancing, and some of what we have, the disturbing things that we've witnessed via Facebook and IG, videotapes that have been taken of police officers brutally punching and beating some of our young people within the communities of East New York and Brownsville, as well as in some Black and Brown communities within Lower Manhattan. So, how you doing? Some of the things that's concerning me, and I've reached out to the 75th Precinct as well as the District Attorney's Office. The response is that they're actually under investigation. Some of the incidents, the police officers did in fact have body cams on, and they are looking and reviewing these tapes before coming out and really speaking on it. And some of the things that have disturbed me is that in discussing the concerns about what we saw, we have questions coming up regarding or statements being made in regards to the individual's previous record. So they was arrested a month ago, or we don't know, this is a regular to the police precinct. But here's what my concern is. One, why is it that in every case that there's an arrest made, instead of the police officers in the community dealing with what's going on at that moment, that we have to demonize and criminalize and bring up past records of any given individual when they're Black and Brown. That's one. Number two, one of the instances we saw where there were 3 white cops sitting on an individual that they apprehended. And I'm not saying that that's something that they didn't have to do because we didn't see what happened beforehand. But once they had that individual apprehended and we noticed that he had a mask on his face, why was it necessary for that white cop to then proceed to punch in the head this young man that was on the ground? After that, we witnessed him get up, starts yelling at the other individuals in the back of the camera we could barely see, and telling them to get back. Pulled out his stick. However, as they moved back, he moved closer to them and then continued to tell them to move back. And then as they moved even further back, he moved even closer to them. And at some point asked the young man, did he want to go to jail with the other kid that was on the floor? And when he asked him why, he said, because you're not wearing your mask. My concern is, when did it become okay for other communities to be protected while our communities are being policed? Protection, policing. We watched during the hot days in Manhattan where there was clearly no social distancing. There were no masks, no gloves, no nothing being worn. We saw a couple of police officers actually handing out masks. They weren't policing, they were protecting. However, in every instance that we witnessed, which is the instance in the situation that I just described. We saw a situation in Brownsville over by Marcus Garvey. We saw another situation in East New York where a cop punched a young man. Again, we don't know what happened prior to that. Um, and then we saw the other officer grab a camera from the young man that was actually filming all of this. So now that has become criminal as well. Another situation where they asked that they move back. As they move back, they got into their space. We're very disturbed as a community. I'm disturbed about what's happening. I have requested some individuals to come on the show next week and the following week. So hopefully by then we'll know what the results are of these body cams and an investigation. But the same things that hold for other communities should hold for us as well. We see limited violations given out in other communities. We see arrests being made in our communities. It's definitely savage inequalities. And these are things that we can't tolerate in our communities. So I want to be fair about things. I want to make sure that we give a voice to everyone so we can really understand what's in a mindset. But here's the one question that I want to know. What exactly is the directive that you're giving for our communities that's different from what you're giving in other communities? We were growing as a community in the direction of great community policing. And this new commanding officer, I'm a little disturbed because on two instances, he was actually present when these attacks were made from the police officers onto these young people. And my question is, why were these officers so okay with behaving in that way in front of their commanding officer? Is that the culture that he's creating in the precinct? These are questions that I have. These are questions that I've asked. And hopefully we can have more discussion about it and bring some of these officers on, the district attorney on, to kind of discuss what's happening. But we're going to go ahead and go into our next guest, which is the CEO of Beacon Elder Care, Yvonne Murphy.
Good morning, Nikki.
Good morning. Good morning.
Thank you for having me on Voices of New York, of East New York. And I would like to say Happy Mother's Day to all of the mothers out there.
Happy Mother's Day to you as well, and happy Mother's Day. Thank you. So Miss Murphy is having a little bit of technical difficulty with her camera, but we're going to proceed because we can hear you. It's fantastic, the sound. So as your camera comes in, we'll just move along. Thank you so much for coming in today because we got a lot of great information last Sunday. That's fantastic. I see you. We got a lot of really great information last Sunday, and we wanted to really continue this discussion and really kind of, if you can, remind us and refresh us regarding what does Beacon Elder Care do?
Yes, Beacon Elder Care is a licensed home health aid agency, the licensed home care agency, and we provide home health aides, LPNs, and registered nurses. We're licensed in the 5 boroughs and Nassau County. We also have social work services and geriatric care management.
So what exactly is home care? Like,
home care is a supportive service within your home. It's a home health aide that comes to your house and they assist you with cooking, cleaning, bathing, light housekeeping, shopping, escort to doctor's appointments. The home health aide gives that senior their independence back.
So with home health care, who is home care helping? How are they able to help someone who may be well or sick?
Well, how the home health aide can help the well person, that's normally the caretaker or it's the family member, it's the daughter or the grandchildren, and they're trying to take care of grandma, grandpa, mom, and dad. That's the well person, the caretaker. What the home health aide allows that person to do is get back to taking care of their personal needs, their home, their family, their jobs. And when they come to visit mom and dad, they just come and visit. They don't come to start working again. For the sick person, the home health aide can give them more mobility back because oftentimes their walking around is unsteady, their gait is unsteady. They can help them with their nutritional management. Nutritional management is very important, especially in seniors. They take sometimes a large amount of medication and at times on an empty stomach. So the home health aide assists with housekeeping, grocery shopping, taking them to their doctor's appointment to keep them well, and nutritional management that helps both the sick person and the well person.
Okay. So what are some of the ways to pay for home care? Like, what are some of the ways that they can pay? Is that covered by insurance?
There are a number of insurances that do cover for home care. Medicare, which is an insurance you receive from retirement, that pays for short term acute medical episodes. For instance, a discharge from the hospital or discharge from the nursing home. They will refer you to some home health aid services, and your Medicare can pay for that. Medicaid is another insurance that is an income qualifying insurance. It's an entitlement benefit that you can receive if you apply for it, and you have to have limited resources to do so. There are planning techniques that you can use in order to become eligible for Medicaid, and Beacon Elder Care can help with that. There's also catastrophic coverage. A lot of these 30, 40-year-old retirement plans, when they worked, they paid 80 cents a week for 30 years. That's for catastrophic coverage. So you should call your pension fund and find out if you have that plan. It oftentimes covers up to $50,000 worth of care. And lastly, there's long-term care insurance, which is a private insurance that you pay for in order to access home care needs.
You mentioned catastrophic insurance. What exactly is that?
So catastrophic insurance is a benefit from your retirement plan that helps you if you went into the hospital and now you're coming back to the community and you need services above and beyond what your traditional insurance would cover. That activates your catastrophic coverage.
What would be an example of catastrophic situation?
So you are 72 and you fell and you broke your hip, you were otherwise well, and now you're accruing hospital stay bills, and then you're accruing rehab stay bills, and it's above and beyond what your regular traditional insurance would cover. So you have out of pocket expenses combined with your cost of medical care bills. That's a catastrophic event. And so you can reach out to your pension fund and let them know that you were just in the hospital, you were just in rehab, you have all these medical bills. Do I have catastrophic coverage? Because you have to hit a certain dollar amount of medical coverage in order for the catastrophic coverage to turn on.
Now, you mentioned long term versus short term. What exactly is long term care?
So long-term
Long-term
care.
care insurance.
Right. Long-term care insurance, unlike traditional health insurance policies, long-term care insurance is a policy that you pay into when you're younger and you pay it over time. And when you have a medical event and you meet the qualifying period, you can use this private long-term care insurance policy that you've paid for.
So you kind of answered my next question in terms of paying for. Do you have to actually pay for long term care insurance? And so, is this something you're saying? This is something that you pay into when you're younger. This is not something that you can obtain as you get older.
You can. The cost will be more expensive. So when you're younger, it's a less expensive cost per month policy. You need to take a medical exam and you need to qualify in order to get the long-term care insurance. If you pay when you're older, it's much more expensive. And at that point, that's when you're starting to have different medical comorbidities, a heart disease, pulmonary disease, diabetes. So those types of medical diagnosis will make the policy cost more.
So this is not the same as a life insurance policy, is it?
No, so long-term care insurance is for you when you're alive to pay for the coverage that you need for yourself now. Um, Life insurance policies is when you're deceased, but there are components of a life insurance policy that you can use, but that's an insurance related question that I wouldn't be able to answer.
So how would a long-term care insurance pay for home care?
So long-term care insurance, when you apply for it, there's different riders and options that you can use. Long-term care insurance pays the dollar amount that you would ordinarily pay privately out of your bank account. So what I tell people is, I often talk about generational wealth, Beacon Elder Care. So when we talk about generational wealth, we're trying to plan and amass resources that we can leave to our family members when we're not here. But one medical event could wipe out all of your resources. So part of planning your generational wealth is to have something in place that you can tap into to pay for your medical illness that's not out of your bank account. That's part of planning.
So this is extremely important for us to really discuss this in our communities, because a lot of times we lack planning, and there has been many situations, especially in the communities where we have a lot of underlying health conditions that plague many residents. So it is very important. How would someone, where would someone go to seek long-term care insurance, and what's some of the criteria for them to actually qualify for that?
So in order to get long-term care insurance, you would need to work with an agent, an insurance agent, which can put in the application for you. A trigger to use your long-term care insurance once you receive it is activities of daily living that are compromised. So let's say you can no longer walk as well as you used to. You now need a walker or a cane, or you're in a wheelchair, or you can't use the bathroom like you used to, or you can't cook or dress or clean. These activities of daily living are triggers that get your policy to activate and pay for care. But there's qualifying periods. Some people pay for 30 days, some people pay for 60 days, some people pay for 90 days, which means you have to, in 30, 60, 90 days, pay for yourself until the policy activates. And then the policy will either reimburse you for services moving forward, or the policy will pay directly to the home care agency that's providing the care. So, and I really want to emphasize, like you said, Nikki, it's about misinformation and just not having the knowledge in the community. Um, I understand that long-term care insurance you have to pay for, but you pay now or you pay later, because when we get older, it's unavoidable that we run into medical problems. And this is a good plan to not take money away from our children and their children and their children.
So we have to really get more into this. So I want to be able to invite you back next week to continue this discussion, if that's okay. But I also want to know, so that we can have folks calling and starting to prepare, how can someone actually get in contact with you to further discuss ways for them to pay for their support and to stay in the home safely, as opposed to going to a nursing home? Some folks can remain in their home safely with the support of home healthcare services. How can someone get in contact with you?
You can call 718-406-9500 extension 0. That's 718-406-9500 extension 0. You can email us at info@beaconeldercare.com. And then on our website, beaconeldercare.com, you can click to call us directly, or you can click to email us directly.
So you will come back next week as well?
I would love to come back next week.
I appreciate that because there's a lot of questions coming in regarding planning. And that's the one thing that we were absent, especially within this COVID-19
Right.
pandemic. We were absent planning, and moving forward, we know what to expect. We know how to prepare,
Right.
and
So
that's what we want to talk about: preparation.
Right. So I just want to leave everyone with saying that healthcare proxies, power of attorneys are very important. Long-term care insurance is important, and doing the proper planning is important. And in these very dangerous times, make sure we all wash our hands, wear those masks, stay up with social distancing, and I will gladly and happily see everybody next week.
And we'll talk more about planning next week. I saw your question, Patrick Toussaint. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you so much. Happy Mother's Day once again. And see you next week.
Yes. See you next week. Thank you. Happy Mother's Day.
CEO Yvonne Murphy, folks. So we will continue the discussion next week. It's extremely important. How you doing, Steve? Who else? I saw a few other people coming up as well. Gerald, I think I saw. Thank you for tuning in. Hey, Stanley. Um, so I just, we spoke a little bit about, hi, Marie. Um, we spoke a little bit about what we saw throughout the week and what was extremely disturbing. How you doing, Joyce? Thank you. Um, we saw a little bit about what we saw last week. During this week, there's a lot happening within our communities. One of the things, in addition to addressing the behavior of the police officers in terms of protection versus policing, we also have to. How you doing, Anna? Okay, all right, no problem. Um, we also have to address our community in terms of making sure that we are social distancing. Um, One of the concerns is not just about protecting yourself, it's about protecting other people. It's about wearing the mask so that you're not um putting others in danger. Remember, we have to go to the store. Some people want to get fresh air. There is nothing wrong with that. There's no criminal act in that. What's happening is that our folks are walking around. We don't necessarily know if we're carrying it or not, which is another issue within our community. Testing. Thank God I watched Hakeem Jeffries, Congressman Jeffries, talk about positioning some of the churches, which is a discussion I've had with their office as well, just in regards to the many folks out here in this community that actually have space that we can facilitate testing in, and that we need to take advantage of that. East New York is one of the only places that lacks testing. So I got the response that only health and hospital locations are able to do that. And I came back with, well, is the Jacob Javits Center a health and hospital location? Is Central Park a health and hospital location? So why are these restrictions being put on our communities? So I'm happy to hear that they will be discussing setting up some church locations for that central in this part of East New York, so that we can take advantage of having our community tested a lot more, knowing exactly if one tests positive, in order for us to seek either proper care or make sure that we're quarantining properly as well. Another concern that I do have is that some folks are testing, quarantining for 14 days, and they're still testing positive if they're able to get another test for COVID-19. So my question then becomes, do we need longer than 14 days? Um, we just have to be a lot more educated, a lot more safe about how we're moving out here. And it's not, again, just about yourself, it's about your loved ones, exposing them to these things. And now we're seeing children actually exposed to these things. We just have to be careful, and we have to be in a position to not allow others to protect us, but we have to also protect ourselves. But we're going to go ahead and welcome our next guest. Is she there? Um, Kimberly Council. Kimberly Council. She is with us. She is the city council candidate for the 37th council district, and that is a race that is happening this year. And we're going to talk to Kim Council about what's happening with that. Welcome, Kim, and happy Mother's Day.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you so much for having me on the show. Happy Mother's Day to you too.
Thank you so much. So, Kim, let's get right into it. Talk to me about what's happening with the council race, and first of all, why is there even a council race happening at this particular time? Because the council race is supposed to be in 2021. So, how did we get here in June?
The current city council person resigned in January. There was an announcement, I think, January 25th or 26th. And then that Monday, a special election was declared. So he got a job working as executive director for the Freelancers Union and resigned from that position. So this district has been without representation since January of this year. I mean, there's an office, but there is no one that can sit in meetings and advocate for resources for the community. So I decided a couple of days into petitioning that I was going to run for the race. I had to pray about it. I had to have a couple of conversations with my kids and family members and make sure that everything was in place. And then I decided to get in the race, and we went forward. So there was a special election that was, and cut me off at any point. Reverend Kim can talk for a minute.
It's fine. It's totally fine. Just want to get a clear understanding of how we got here. So that's fine.
So there was supposed to be a special election in April, but because of the pandemic, that special election was canceled, and then we only had the primary. And there's been a lot of things that have been going on. As I said, there was we had 12 days to collect the amount of signatures that we needed. So we collected 885 signatures in about 5 days. Submitted those signatures, and of course there was a challenge, and then there were all these issues. And so in the middle of deciding how, if we were going to spend $10,000 to defend the challenge, I sat down with my lawyer and my team, and we decided let's focus on a primary, because whoever wins in the special, there has to be a primary. So we decided to shift our focus and begin collecting signatures for the primary.
So just to stop you, so that we get a clear understanding of what's going on, there was a resignation of the sitting city council member in January. A special election was called, which was supposed to happen in April. There was 12 days to get those signatures. You started off a little later in the campaign after praying and talking to your family members. And I do know that you experienced a personal tragedy as well, which led to a delayed decision as well. And at that point, in April, you had got 885 signatures, and then it was challenged. And then at that point, you had to then refocus your energy onto the June election, which is coming up, as opposed to spending money to kind of combat the April challenge. Are we with you?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So, what areas briefly does your council district cover?
The district covers City Line, Bushwick, Cypress Hills, East New York, Ocean Hill. I think those are the areas. It might cover a small slither of Bed-Stuy, but those are the areas that it covers.
Okay, fantastic. So now we're here for the June elections. You have to collect petitions again. You have to collect
Well, yeah,
signatures
so
again.
we had to I think gosh, it was on the 25th of March, I want to say. It was we had the February 25th, I think we started. We were allowed to collect petitions again. So we began the process of collecting the signatures again. We get the volunteers back out. We start collecting signatures. And then there were some overtures made to me to think about perhaps running for another seat or doing some other things, but we decided to continue to pursue this race because we were already in it. Was already vested in this seat and had run for city council in 2013 and realized that there are a lot of resources that you're able to bring to the district from the local level. So we start collecting signatures, and then the coronavirus becomes a major part of the news. You have the outbreak in Westchester, and so you had the governor and the mayor on TV on the regular, and they're beginning this conversation about social distancing. I think it was May 7th when that term was first used by the governor about socially distancing ourselves. And then you had them coming on and saying that we shouldn't be canvassing, we shouldn't be doing those types of things. So your volunteers begin to get nervous. The people in the community are nervous. They don't want to take your pins. People are beginning to put on face masks and grab gloves. So there were a lot of challenges with that during that time collecting signatures. But we forged ahead and collected the signatures. And once again, you face these objections. So we had the general objections, and then we have the specific objections, and then there was this discrepancy as to which number the governor's executive order. So the governor issues an executive order.
So let me stop you for a second because you're mentioning objections and you mentioned objections before. Walk me through that process. Like, what are we talking about? Objections? Who's doing these objections? And why would someone do objections? Like, walk us through that.
Yeah. So I mean, like politics is full of politics. So you have, a lot of individuals who don't want to be challenged. They don't want to race. So they're trying to find any way to get their opponents out of the race. So what we have in our race is a candidate who is supported by uh, the Democratic Committee for Kings County, and they've issued challenges. That opponent, Darma Diaz, has had individuals go and look at our petitions, and try to invalidate certain signatures and go through this process of knocking people off the ballot before the race even begins. So, and it's a tactic that's used so that you are using time, money, and resources fighting these challenges as opposed to being able to, go out in the district and make a name for yourself. But, we're used to having to deal with those kinds of things and juggling multiple things as mothers, as individuals who have, as people who have children and who are constantly oppressed. You understand what it is to face challenges on a daily basis. So, we had these individuals who went through the petitions and they filed specific objections. And when they object to the signatures, you then have to go down to the Board of Elections. You have to sit at the computers and look at the signatures, to try to get the people, to find the signatures to go back on the ballot. Then you'd have to go to the individual, get them to sign an affidavit. Then you'd have to get a notary, have the notary notarize the signature, and then you'd have to pay the lawyer to go into court to fight for this. So it's a very arduous process. And to be quite honest with you, in this season of pandemic, you alluded to, the challenges. I lost my dad. My dad became sick on April the 3rd. As a matter of fact, I was um, at my dad's house trying to decide how, like which hospital I was going to take him to when my lawyer called to let me know that there had been, specific objections filed and that we had to make a decision as to whether or not we were going to go to court. So their challenges were filed. You have to make the decision whether or not you're going to go to court. And everybody is dealing with so many different things. I think one of the candidates in this race was COVID positive and had to be rushed to the hospital. Another candidate that is no longer in the race while all this stuff was going, his father was positive. So it's really unconscionable in my personal opinion during this time when we're in unprecedented times when people are dealing with personal challenges and want to represent their community to have to pivot and then fight a legal battle in order to get on the ballot. So we press forward. We decided to I decided to file a validating petition. And I also did not want to endanger the people who were working on the campaign, to have them go and sit at a public computer and then have to go and further interact with people in order to get their signatures. So it's very possible that, we had the signatures that we needed in order to remain on the ballot. So I kind of, I kind of bossed around. So the executive order decreased the amount of signatures required in order to get on the
The
ballot,
governor's executive
the
order.
governor's executive order,
Okay.
by 30%. And so the issue of law here,
And what was the number that was initially required
um, typically for a
for the
local,
city?
the city charter dictates that you only need 450 signatures for ballot access in the city council. The state legislation, the state law that dictates that you need 900 signatures. So from the time that that city council ordinance has passed up until today, no one has challenged the 450 requirement. So when the governor issues an executive order saying that we need 30% of the signatures in order to get on the ballot, the logical assumption is that it's 30% of the 450, as he did across the line with every other race. If you're running for assembly, it's 500 signatures, and that number was reduced to 150. So in city council, 450, 30% of 450 is 135. What the other side has contended was that it was the 900 number, and therefore you needed 270 signatures. And then what the board came in and said, no, there is no reduction. He wasn't even talking about our race, that you needed 450 signatures. So there was a lot of ambiguity, and the judge decided,
Mm.
the Supreme Court judge decided, Judge Walker, that this really is not the way that you should be running elections, challenging people. And this is, I feel very strongly about this too, which is why I've never issued a challenge to anyone that is running in city council. Let the people decide who they want to represent them. Let the people of the district decide. And if you're confident in who you are and what you're doing and what services you can offer to your constituency, then you let the people decide. You take this to the people. That's the whole point of us being able to vote. But it seems like there are systems in place that want to disenfranchise an entire voting block of individuals and let them have absolutely no choice when it comes to ballot access, and have one individual on the ballot.
So you won to remain on the ballot.
I sure did.
Okay. So where are we now with this process?
Well, I mean, of course, we won the Supreme Court decision, but they weren't satisfied with that, so they appealed that decision. And so we are now waiting for, there's a panel of appellate court judges in Second Department that are now, they've heard the arguments. Our lawyers argued on Wednesday. So Misbah Abdeen and myself, we were both added back onto the ballot. So there is a race in the 37th Council District, and I'm determined. I think I have a very strong case. Even if however this goes, that we're going to press forward. So Kim Council for Council, write my name on the line.
So can you talk to me about who appealed the Supreme Court decision?
The lawyers that represented the Kings County Committee appealed. I think the Board of Elections appealed, and I also think I think Corporate Counsel weighed in with a amicus brief for the city
Tell us a little bit about what that means.
about the race and about what the appeal this what the appeal. So there was a decision that was handed down by the Supreme Court. They weren't satisfied with the outcome, so they decided to appeal to a higher court. So now you have the second department of the Supreme Court, which is the appellate division for the city of New York. And there's five judges. They sit on a panel and they hear the argument. So the judges can ask questions, lawyers can ask questions. And so my lawyer submitted a brief and argued before this panel. The other side's lawyers submitted a brief. And so our contention is that and so in the law, you have what the law states, and then you have what the intention is. And so that's why oftentimes we'll look at legislative history. So we look at things like what the governor said in his press conferences and what the governor said in his tweets. And so the governor was clear that his concern was for the safety and health and well-being of the citizens of New York. He was pretty clear about that. So to then say that he is not concerned about the citizens in the 37th Council District, I think is a disservice to the governor of the state of New York, even to the mayor. And so what I think is unconscionable is that these individuals are seeking to circumvent the choice of the people in 37 districts. So it's like we want to choose who it is that you have as your representative. And we're talking about millions of dollars that are poured into our district. Whoever is a city council individual, a city council person for this district will be able to determine how money is allocated to community-based organizations. They'll be able to determine how resources are spent. They'll be able to, for a year and a half, there is an election in 2021, but for a year and a half, we'll have an individual. And I think the people need to decide who they want representing them. Who is the person that will fight hardest for resources in our community? We had to, as community-based organizations, submit applications for funding by February 18th of 2020. So February 18th of 2020, the organizations that were in this district had to submit requests for funding. There was no one from the 37th Council District at those meetings, at those budget meetings when they were sitting and talking about how money was going to be allocated, how resources are going to be poured into our community. We did not have representation. And so we definitely need someone at the table who can then come in and say, hey, listen, I want this to go to this. There's so many, and our nonprofits are hurting. Our small businesses are hurting. They've been overfined. They've been dealing with so many different
Wow.
things. They've been shut down since this pandemic has come in. Many of them have not probably been able to apply for the paycheck protection program. So we want to make sure that we're getting those things. So I'm planning to have a lawyer come on. In a couple of days to answer questions for small businesses and other individuals who are trying to
So,
apply for
so
protection.
let's stop right there. So we're going to move on from the idea that I'm assuming that the goal is to make sure that all of the opponents are off the ballot, so there is no race for one particular candidate. And then I want you to delve into a little bit more, which you already began the discussion about what's at stake. So we're looking at funding,
Hmm?
discretionary funding, for a lot of not-for-profit organizations. Talk about what's really, really at stake for this. And then I want to move into you as an opponent and what you really, what sets you apart from the other opponents. So let's talk about what's at stake right now.
Well, what's at stake is money and resources for the district. What's at stake is having representation and someone sitting at the table that represents the will of the people as opposed to the will of um, what I'll call the machine. And so it's very important that you have someone that represents what the people want. So we have our agenda, and we sit down and we think about the things that are important. But we have to go out and listen, because the things that are important to us are often they're important to the people, but there are other things. Like, so I've had conversations with individuals where I'm like, we need more affordable housing. We need to put more money into our educational systems. But we're also in a pandemic. And then there are people who are concerned about, double parking and being ticketed. They're concerned about community policing. They're concerned about all of these different things. And so your city council person, your state assembly person, these are the individuals that are able to go back and have conversations with. And so, like, on Thursday, and I came back from burying my dad, and I got a text message that there was a Zoom conference call with Chief Madry. I mean, Chief Madry is someone who I had the pleasure of meeting when I had my own encounter with NYPD in 2009. So, I texted the person that set up the Zoom conference and told them who I was, and they let me on the conference call. So on this conference call with Chief Madry, because this is in the backdrop of what's been happening, the over policing in communities of color, the incidents that have been happening in Bushwick and in Brownsville and in East New York, where in one particular community you would have, as you were talking about earlier in the show, you'd have police protecting the community and police handling the community with kid gloves. And then in another section of town, you'd have an over policing. You'd have individuals being thrown on the ground. You'd have individuals being harassed and intimidated. And so, who is the person that then goes and holds the NYPD to task? Who is the person that then goes and has the conversation with Chief Madry? So thankfully I was able to jump on that call and listen to what his plans are, and then offer input and reach out to him and say, hey, listen, like, because the optics of this are horrible. Because and they always use the term about bad apples when it comes to police officers and these incidents, and saying that they're isolated. They're not isolated. It is systemic. It is indicative of the way that they police our communities. And the way you get rid of that is not by taking 5 years to go through. And I understand due process. I do, as someone who has worked in law. for over 22 years. I understand due process. I understand that everybody deserves a right to have their things heard. But I don't understand being put on desk duty and still collecting your paycheck. So when there are true consequences for the individuals who are doing these types of things, when they realize that, hey, wait a minute, I'm going to lose my livelihood, not long term, but immediately upon review for this type of behavior. I'm sorry, there's no way that you can explain to me how you can apprehend a terrorist, but you can't seem to do the same thing in communities of color. We are not as bad as they try to make us out to be. It's just there's just this pattern of harassment that has to stop.
So, Kim, before moving on to, can you tell us a little bit about Kim Council? Who is Kim Council?
Kim Council is a mom. I have two children, a son and a daughter, young adults. I'm a grandma. God, I hate to say that, but I am. I'm a minister. I'm an associate minister at Berean Baptist Church where I grew up. I've been a minister since 2003. I work as a law librarian at a law firm down in Lower Manhattan. I've been there for 22 years. I've served as president of the Law Library Association of Greater New York. I sit on the board of directors of the Local Development Corporation of East New York, an organization that I'm proud to be a part of, that has worked very hard with minority and business-owned women, businesses, as well as businesses in the East Brooklyn bid. I've also served as president of the East Brooklyn Housing Development Corporation, and that organization in particular, we've done some wonderful work building affordable housing in East New York. We have 2 units that are already up with over 500 units of affordable, and I'm talking affordable housing based on your income. And we have 1 unit that is underway on Van Sinderen. I've also served for several years as the secretary of the board of directors of the Berean Community and Family Life Center. We've built 107 units of affordable housing in Crown Heights and 97 units of senior housing. And then for the past 2 years, I've served. So in my spare time, I work from 9 to 5 at the law firm, and then I'd come in the evenings and serve as the executive director of the church's nonprofit. So we've had youth development programs. The center has a award-winning drumline where we work with young people, and we have like an after-school program with them, doing youth development program. We do life skills. We talk to them about getting their stuff together. We help them with college applications. We actually give $1,000 scholarship to kids who come
Wow.
through the program, and we also have senior programming. So working with Councilmember Alika Ampry Samuel and Councilmember Cornegie, we got $42,000 for a NORC grant, which is a naturally occurring retirement communities. So we are able to provide services to our senior housing. So we've been able to do a whole lot of things with that population. We have a food pantry that we were running. The pantry at one point was just an emergency pantry. And when I came on, I was like, we see the need, we have to meet it. So we became a full pantry. We meet every Saturday. We would be serving. We served we served about 30, at least 30 families. And when the pandemic hit, we stopped petitioning, so that we became a mobile pantry. So we would actually deliver food to people. So we would have people from social services calling us, and I was calling people around the district to find out, like, do you need anything, do you have anything? So we would pack the bags and then we would drop those off at people's houses. We also do a lot of women's empowerment conferences. So I've been serving um, the community of Brooklyn, the entire community, because we don't limit it to that. But I've been serving, and so we were also working. I also sit on a recently formed advisory board for One Brooklyn Health. It was started with Dr. Barry Smith and Congressman Ed Towns, to look at access to healthcare and what's going on with Brooklyn, because we know that there's some serious issues with healthcare in Brooklyn, and hospitals have been underfunded. They've turned lich. They're looking to turn lich into apartment buildings, and market rate, not affordable. And we've had Interfaith has been gutted. Brookdale has had so many issues with funding. So there's been a depletion of funds being poured into our district. So we're looking at what's going on in our community. So myself and a couple of other people are meeting together, and that's going to be in East New York, but it will impact the entire borough of Brooklyn. I mean, I'm a servant. I've always been a servant. I've always been concerned about people, their livelihoods and their lives, and I've been content to work behind the scenes. I'm not someone who's looking to always have my name called. I'm looking to do the work. So I've been doing the work behind the scenes for years. But then just got very frustrated with what I was seeing happening in my local community, where you have investors coming in and purchasing property and flipping property and raising our property taxes, where you have the cost of rent increasing exponentially and people's salaries remaining flat, where you had millions of dollars that are owed to our local school districts from the state of New York, and that money has not materialized. And even, again, the over policing I shared earlier. In 2009, I had picked my friend up from the airport and was going to another friend's house to hang out, and was driving up Georgia Avenue on my way back home, and got pulled over by the police. And it was the most, I did not think that I was going to make it home. I mean, they opened up my doors, they were threatening me. I mean, it was like, it's three white unarmed police officers for a young black woman on Georgia Avenue where there's no lights and there's
You
very
mean
little.
three white armed
Yeah,
police
yeah,
officers.
unarmed. They're armed. Yeah, they're armed. Sorry. Um, and for an unarmed black, young woman in her car, and I mean, like, that pattern. And then, I mean, it just escalated. It escalated to a point where somebody called me, and I was like, listen, I'm being stopped by the cops, and they started yelling and screaming and yelling and going back. And next thing you know, a squad car comes around the corner, and they're like glaring their lights down on me. And it's like, I really did not think that I was going to make it home. Thank God for Chief Madry. That's how I met him, because I was determined that I was not going to let that be the end of the story. So I began a letter writing campaign, and I wrote a letter, and I began to research, because that's what I do. And I looked at the complaints that had been filed against the 75th precinct. The 75th precinct at that time, this is 2009, there are 365 days in a year. There were 366 complaints against the 75th precinct. They were second. No, they were number one in complaints for that particular year. And then I began to look over a course of 10 years for civilian complaints against the 77th precinct. The 77th precinct, and I think the 42nd precinct in the Bronx, would always be in competition for the most complaints. And so, if we have this pattern of harassment that exists in community of color, we've got to give organizations like the CCRB some teeth. So they exist, they can sit down and they can have a conversation and make recommendations. But why is it that their recommendations are not taken seriously? And I remember when all of this stuff was happening, I'd reached out to Tish James. I'd sent her a text message. I think she was a public advocate at the time. In the state of Wisconsin, I believe, there was a white teenager, a white young man. He was 21 years old. He was arrested by the police. He was handcuffed, and he was killed while in custody. His family won like a $1.6 million settlement against the city. That father took that money and he lobbied and advocated up until he got the law changed. He lobbied all the way up to the governor. He spent all of that money. And in the state of Wisconsin, I think it was Wisconsin or Minnesota, one of those Midwestern states, when there is an incident with an unarmed individual being killed in police custody, they are not allowed to investigate. They are not allowed to prosecute. They bring in an independent prosecutor, someone who is not beholden to the police force. And so that's a part of the problem that we have, where you have police policing police. When you
So
have
quickly, I want to give a shout out to Anna Santiago. And I want to ask a quick question because it sounds as if this, first of all, this is an issue that's been plagued in our communities, in which there's a group that is looking to make sure that the members of the CCRB are actually elected.
Mhm.
Uh, do you support that?
Oh, most definitely. I think they should be elected. I think they should answer to the people. But I think also we have got to give them, and this is where legislation comes in, where city council and different organizations come in, and the mayor, they have got to have more power to prosecute. They've got to, like, they make the recommendations, and um, they're given to I guess the review board, or the agencies that investigate police misconduct, but they don't have to act on those recommendations. So you put together a board that will appease the people on paper, but they have no power. They don't have power to prosecute. They don't have power to do those kinds of things. And again, I understand due process, but I know that if I do something on my job that I'm not supposed to do, I am held accountable. I am fired, or I
Great.
my money is taken away from me. And so that is the issue that we have. I don't have an issue with police officers. There are some people that my boyfriend is a police officer. He's a retired detective. So I don't have an issue with police officers. I understand that their job is incredibly difficult, but I have an issue when they don't have a problem in other communities showing courtesy, professionalism, and respect, but they can't do the same in communities of color. I have a serious issue with that. And I feel that the problem is that we have not held them accountable for their actions.
Fantastic. So you would support legislation that would hold officers accountable.
Not only would I support it, I'd probably co-sponsor it.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So, if we can, we got a couple of questions in regards to the direction post COVID of the assistance of small businesses. Um, there's not a lot of information necessarily. It's a lot of information, but it's not getting in the right hands. Some folks are finding themselves applying for some of this stuff. They're not necessarily getting access to that. And earlier you mentioned about doing something in regards to small businesses, having a conversation about that as well. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So I was actually on the phone last night with a very good friend of mine who's a lawyer, Sylvia Kennard. And so she has a friend that is a lawyer. She told me his name and I can't remember it. And so she's been reaching out to him to see how he can come in. Because the thing is that this program exists. Many people don't know how to apply for it. They apply for it and they are not necessarily getting approved. And so there was $2 billion that was allocated to help small businesses. Any business that had less than 500 employees, if you apply for this, and you were supposed to apply through your bank, but a lot of banks don't even know how to help people to apply for this. So we have a lawyer that we're going to bring on. And we're gonna, we'll put it out on social media, and he'll be available to answer questions and help people to navigate the system. Because again, like when other people have a cold, now we can say we have coronavirus. It is crippling our businesses, and small businesses are the lifeline of our local community. So we want to make sure that we're supporting them in any way that we can. The nonprofit that I'm on the board for, successfully submitted and was able to get money in order to maintain payroll so that they could keep paying for, the people that work for the LDC. But there are other organizations who have not been successful, and we want to make sure that, we can connect you to a resource that can help you to successfully apply for this program, understanding that it is a loan, but there are some portions that will be forgiven if you maintain a certain level. So if you maintain the same amount of pay, if you maintain your same level of payroll, and there's certain things that you can pay for that would allow that money to be forgiven. And so we want to make sure not only that they apply for the loan, but that if there are portions that can be forgiven so that it won't hurt their bottom line, that they're doing that properly. So I'm gonna bring in a lawyer. In a couple of days, I'll be posting on social media and letting people know where that's going to be. Most likely, it will be on Facebook Live, like your program is, so that everyone can have access to that information. But people can inbox me. They can email me at counselforcounsel@gmail.com if they have questions and if they want to know what to do.
So slow down. Say that again, slower.
I'm sorry, Counsel for Council, COUNCIL, for FORCOUNCIL. So it's like City Council, Kim Council, Counsel for Council @gmail.com. So you could just send me an email and I will connect you with the resources that you need. If you have a question, if there's something that you need, if we need to get food to you, if we need to help you with anything, we'll definitely want to do that.
So Kim Council going into City Council, what should we expect? What's some of the first two or three things that we should expect from Kim Council when you enter into the council seat?
I mean, the first thing would be budget review, looking at the budget, looking at how money has been, because these meetings are happening now. Finding out how much money has been set aside for my district, and finding out how much more money we can get for the district, for the programs that are in place. The next thing that would be very important to me is housing, affordable housing, and not just, and again, so we're talking about affordable housing a lot of times with rent and how that level of affordability is calculated, but also affordable home ownership. So
Yes.
these are the things that that I want to deal with, and also programs for seniors. we know that our budget is going to take a serious hit. We know that we're already operating at a deficit, and we know that number 45 has already, insinuated that he is not going to bail out New York. New York, which incidentally pays more money into the federal budget than any other state. So we know that we're going to have to tighten our belts and figure out where their cuts are going to be. But I want to make sure that my district is not hurt when it comes to funding and allocating funding. At post corona. But we also want to make sure again that that we're getting information out to people about how to protect themselves and how to get access to healthcare, and making sure that we keep ICE out of our communities, out of our courts, so that the people in my district feel safe, accessing the things that they need in order to survive and thrive. So housing, budgeting, and healthcare probably would be, the first three things that I focus on.
So, what are some things that we haven't talked about today that you would like to leave um, the voices of East New York followers with and your supporters with, or persons that you want to support you?
Um, let's fight together to bring resources into our community, and don't let anyone else be your voice. I think it's very important that we pay attention to what's going on, and we're clear about what's going on, and that you have the best possible representation in city council. Someone who can bring people together, someone who has relationships with people who are in council and in city government, someone who will listen to what your cares are and your concerns are, and who is committed to bringing those resources to you. I am that candidate. I've been doing this all my life. I've been doing it since I was a little girl, been volunteering, doing community service, um, you know, and so what I want to share is that I'm definitely in this race. I've had some personal challenges, but despite those personal challenges, I am fully committed to running and representing the people of the 37th Council District.
And you are a resident of the district, correct?
Almost definitely. I live in Cypress Hills. I've been in Cypress Hills for, good God, my daughter is 22. We've been in Cypress Hills for 22 years. So yes, I am very much a resident. I live down the hill from Congressman Towns.
Okay, okay. So, first of all, I want you to come back. You touched on a lot of great things. You're doing a tremendous amount in the community for those who, where's Kim Council? Kim Council has been doing a lot of great things within the community as it pertains to housing and healthcare and public safety. And we can go on and on. Um, you do have an extensive background because you are a researcher. You are a law librarian, correct?
Yes, I am.
By trade. So you're an extensive researcher, which is a tremendous asset. Um, but how would someone help you? One, how would they donate to your campaign? Two, how can they volunteer for your campaign? Three, how can they access your social media and or websites for your upcoming shows that you have coming up?
First of all, I just want to take a second and thank Nikki Lucas. Nikki and I have been friends forever. She's someone who I have the highest level of respect for, and she has been holding it down in East New York. And I can't wait to see what 2021 looks like for you.
Mhm.
Um, Council for Council is Council for Council, or Council the number four Council. Those are my handles on Twitter, on Instagram. It's Council for Council.
Is
And
that
my
FOR or the number four?
Either one works actually. So
Okay.
if you do council number four council for my website, and when you go to the website, there's a donate button there, and there's you can leave your information. Council for Council is the Twitter handle. It's the number four is the Twitter handle, and it's the Instagram handle. I'm Kimberly Council on Facebook, so I am my that's why I'm on Facebook, and it's Kim Council for City Council, FOR, on Facebook, and then the email is for council. So it's either the number four or FOR, but either way, you'll find me. Just put in council for council, and you'll find Kim Council.
And when should we expect your show to air or come on?
Oh, so they pushed me, and I really wasn't interested in doing this, but they pushed me to go live because again, it's like, oh, you got to get out there, you got to do, So I did this live piece, I think, like right after we learned about my dad passing, and people, and so I just began to kind of pray for people, because that's another thing that I do. I take my faith very seriously, and we don't disrespect other people's faith. So Ramadan Mubarak to my brothers and sisters who are fasting right now. Um, but so I was praying and I was talking about coping with COVID, and someone was like, "You should start a show," and I was like, "Are you serious?" So every Saturday at 5 o'clock, we do a coping with COVID series on Facebook Live, and I bring in experts, very much like what Nikki is doing, but we're not as polished. It's the
Oh,
low
stop
budget
it.
version.
Knock it off.
It's the low budget version. So we do a coping with COVID. And yesterday I had on Dr. Terry Jan Blackable, who's a medical doctor, and Dr. Ernest Bonaparte, who is a psychologist, talking about, what people are going through. And these things you can access them on my Facebook page. At 5 o'clock on Saturday, it's live, but they're there for you to go back and review. So it's Counsel for Counsel. That's how you find Kim Counsel.
Okay, and we'll post up some of the information so that folks know how to access that. But thank you so much, Kim Counsel, for coming on Voices of East New York. It was a pleasure speaking with you. Happy Mother's Day again, and you're going to come back, correct?
Nikki, you talk, I do. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like Nikki, and Nikki doesn't take no for an answer. I don't know, what happened to my friend. All of a sudden, it's like no joke. But if you ask, I come. So
Okay, okay. So thank you again, and we'll see you. We'll see you soon.
thank you.
All right, keep doing what you're doing. All right, so we had a great discussion today, folks. We had some really great information. Let's just keep sending in your questions. Keep suggesting guests to have on the show. That's how we pretty much develop our guests based on what people send in and ask about. Um, and thank you for supporting every week. And I'm just asking every week, let's continue to build and let's share, share, share. Let's get to real discussion. Thank you, Marilyn Monroe. Let's get to real discussion and real solutions. Um, let's take it beyond the discussion. So, thanks again. But I'm asking that you guys, when the show comes on at 9 a.m., develop watch parties and also share. That's how the show will grow. That's how we'll grow with the show. That's how we'll be able to continue moving with the show and having and pertinent guest on. So please share, 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 and develop the watch parties. I know y'all do it for Erica Badu and Jill Scott and Teddy Riley and Babyface. Let's do it for our community. This is where we live, and this is what we need to protect. All right. I love y'all. Thank you for tuning in.